termination or even arrest.
In fact, the very first thing that happened to me as a correspondent was a very ugly reminder of the Soviet system and the way that it operated. Several days after I arrived to become the correspondent for U.S. News and World Report magazine, my predecessor, who still was in Moscow at that time, Nick Danilov, was arrested by the KGB and accused of espionage, accused of being a spy. It was, of course, a completely false charge. It was caught up in bigger issues of U.S.-Soviet relations at the time, and the fact that a Soviet diplomat had been arrested in New York, and there was a need to get someone in order to make an exchange. But to have someone who I knew well, who went out for a walk to meet a friend and then not come back, and hours went by and hours went by, and only late that night did we get a call to inform us that he had been arrested.
Foreign journalists were accredited by the Foreign Ministry. During my stay in Moscow, I was never summoned by the press department to be warned or rebuked.
When you are imprisoned, every minute, every second is unpleasant. So it seems to me that that pressure was much more important than the threat of execution. Much more important was that my следователь, my investigator, my interrogator, basically tried to use a happy face on some occasions and a stern face on some occasions, what we in America call good cop, bad cop. He would ask very difficult questions to which I would try to answer, and then the next day he would be very pleasant, and he would talk about his family. He would talk about good relations between our two countries. Why had that not been possible? That was the good cop, bad cop method, and I think it was really quite effective, much more effective than the threat of death.
For many years my father was a refusnik. He had a friend by the name of Nicholas Danilov, a reporter whose parents were part of the first immigration that left the Soviet Union. He worked for U.S. News and World Report, and one day he was arrested and accused of spying. In New York, U.S. authorities arrested Gennady Zakharov, and in Moscow, Nick Danilov was arrested. So the result was what you could call the last crisis of the Cold War, this time between Gorbachev and Reagan. My dad happened to be involved in this affair, being Danilov's friend. When Danilov was finally exchanged for Zakharov, Americans insisted that together with him, a troika of dissidents should be handed over, just to make sure there was some asymmetry. Because Reagan did not like the fact that they had to exchange a spy for a journalist. So my dad was thrown into the bargain since he was a refusnik. The other two were Yuri Orlov, who had just been released from a labor camp, and, I think, Irina Ratushinskaya.
This was the program Parallels Events People on the Voice of America. Next time we will continue the adventures of foreigners in Russia. I am Natalia Boltanskaya.
presents the following National Geographic program as we continue to explore the world around us.
Gorongosa National Park sits right in the middle of Mozambique. In 1964, a long war for independence broke out against Portugal, and that was followed by an even longer civil war that lasted until 1992. The armies fed off the wildlife in the park, and by the time that war was over, there was almost no animals left in the park. It was left for dead. Thank you. I grew up in Africa. My parents moved to Africa when I was 3 years old. I grew up collecting snakes and lizards, bush babies, and all kinds of other wild pets. My mother and father loved nature and were always up for a great adventure. And as a family, we spent every chance we could get camping in the wild. I had an idyllic childhood in Africa. I fell in love with the birds and the plants and the animals. There's something about Africa that just gets in your blood. I know any of you that have been there know what I'm talking about. And in 1978, my dad died in an accident. But before he died, he'd organized a school holiday job for me working with a game capture team. One day, the helicopter pilot flew away to go fly with the National Geographic crew. And he invited me to come with him. And I don't know if they were taking pity on me because my father died or whatever. They invited me to come back and join their crew. I was 17 years old. And that led to a career as a cameraman. And I had the incredible adventures traveling around the world with PBS and National Geographic. But during that time, Africa changed. So much of what I really loved about it disappeared. And as I flew around Africa, I was seeing the impact that humans were having on the continent. But I also saw places where the bush grew back and wildlife returned. And I kept dreaming about rewilding Africa. What would it take to bring it back, or at least bring some of it back? And then, in 2008, I got my first assignment to Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique. It was an incredible place. What I knew about it was that it used to have huge herds of buffalo and zebra and wildebeest. There were thousands of elephants and huge prides of lions. Gorongosa National Park sits right in the middle of Mozambique, which is a huge country. And unfortunately, in 1964, a long war for independence broke out against Portugal. And that was followed by an even longer civil war that lasted until 1992. During that time, the opposition, Renamo, based themselves on Mount Gorongosa. The armies fed off the wildlife in the park, and they killed the elephants for their ivory, which they traded for guns and ammunition. And by the time that war was over, there was almost no animals left in the park. It was left for dead. But then, about 10 years ago, an international team led by this guy, Greg Carr, formed a partnership with the Mozambican government to start a 20-year project to bring that park back. When I arrived in 2008, Greg flew me around, and basically what I saw was one great, huge, beautiful African landscape. I came down with my Land Rover from Kenya, and vehicles were in short supply in the park. So I ended up helping people out. I carried rangers around and scientists, and I spent more of my time going around with people in the park than I did actually filming, and I loved it. It was great. And I stayed, and year after year kind of went by. And during that time, the wildlife started to rebound. And I'm not kidding you, it was amazing how quickly it came back. So not all species, but some species. It was staggering. Everything had a baby. I couldn't get enough of it. And so the next thing I knew, I was officially joining a team of scientists and rangers on this great experiment to see if we could bring Gorongosa back to its former glory and to save it from all of its new threats. But the park had huge problems. The two sides of the Mozambican political system, Renamo and Frelimo. And Renamo were not happy in government, and the leader left his seat in the government and returned to his old Renamo base on Mount Gorongosa with 500 rebel soldiers. It was a really uncomfortable situation for all of us in the park, in fact, in all of Mozambique. But they were only 23 miles away from park headquarters. We couldn't go to the mountain anymore because Renamo beat our rangers and chased them off the mountain and burned their post to the ground. It was really serious times for us in Gorongosa, but there was a lot of the park to explore yet, so we just kept on about our work. One day, flying over the north of the absolute masters of survival, crocodiles. I don't know for sure, but from the air, it looks like a massive gathering, bigger than I've ever seen before. I've got to get a closer look. This could be a great filming opportunity. During the Civil War, while most big animals were being killed off, the crocs just sank to the safety of the riverbeds. Now some people think that Gorongosa may have one of the biggest populations of crocs in Africa. There's a bunch of crocodiles on the beach across the way. Crocodiles are really skittish. They key on movement, so whenever they see anything move, their immediate reaction is to go into the water. I'm just gonna sit quietly inside this hide, and I bet crocodiles will be all around me by the end of the day. After a few hours of waiting, they start to surface. There's something so eerily beautiful about the way these ancient hunters just ooze into view. It gives me chills every time I see it. Will you repeat what you said, please?
Renamo basically have walked away from negotiations, and they said they're going to block EN1 and EN6 tomorrow, and that's definitely going to draw action.
Oh, wow. Okay, that sounds pretty serious. Okay, so what's our plan then? We'll pack up and fly by helicopter back to Chitango?
Just load one tent with, non-essentials. We have to as well.
Okay, copy that. We'll be there shortly. The threat level doesn't look too high. But when a rebel militia says foreigners should leave the area, it's probably a good idea to take a lesson from the crocodiles and back away for a while. God, and we were just starting to get it, too. These guys seem to be on the warpath, so we got to get out of here. It was tense times now in Gorongosa, for sure. And not just for us, but for the elephants. Because Renamo was poaching again, and Gorongosa made great cover. The fighting on the mountain had gotten so bad that government forces repeatedly attacked the Renamo base. A lot of people were killed. Refugees gathered in the town, Villa Gorongosa, outside of the park. And it was a really horrible thing to have to leave the park. And then the rains came. The wet season seemed to cool the flames of war. And a place that looked like a dust bowl when I left became an inland sea. The break in the conflict gives me a chance to return and do something I've been dreaming about. Last year, I flew over a huge colony of nesting birds. It must be one of the biggest bird spectacles in all of Africa. But as far as we know, it's never been properly explored. It's time to saddle up for a serious expedition. And that massive aggregation of crocodiles that was up there on that river north of the lake, I finally was able to get back to it too. While I was up there, I got the best news of all. The leader of Renamo came down from the mountain and signed a peace agreement with the government and put his name on the ballot to run for president. And this was huge because for Gorongosa, the people outside the park really matter. And they need stability. With stability comes tourism, and with tourism comes jobs. It will take a long time for all the animals to come back, but it will happen, I believe, as long as we can save it from all of its new threats: poaching, illegal logging, illegal mining, even settlements inside the park, and human-wildlife conflict outside the park are all big problems that the park faces. But in Gorongosa, you've got Greg Carr and a dedicated team of scientists and rangers that are working hard to protect it. And I believe it will survive. I learned what it takes to fight this fight for conservation. It's perseverance. When times got tough in Gorongosa, I watched Greg Carr and his team just put their head down and work even harder, believing that one day it would get better. And it did. Thank you.
VOA, exploring the world around us.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Doing something on the spot means doing something right now. For example, someone could offer you a job on the spot right after meeting you. But let's see if we can figure out this expression.
Put someone on the spot.
Hey, Jonathan, how was your meeting with Christina?
She asked me how I thought she was doing with the new project.
Well, that's direct.
I know. She really put me on the spot. I actually think she could be doing a lot better.
To put someone on the spot means to put them in a tough or uncomfortable situation. Usually, it means demanding an immediate answer or action. And that's English in a Minute.
Pemirsa, apa kabar? Berjumpa lagi dalam program Mingguan Dunia kita, produksi VOA Indonesia. Kali ini kami bawakan dari Meridian Hill Park di kawasan Washington DC. Saya Rio Tuasikal.
Dan saya Virginia Gunawan. Nah, hari ini pemirsa kami akan mengajak Anda untuk berpiknik karena bulan Juli adalah bulan piknik nasional di Amerika Serikat. Nah, kalau ngomong-ngomong soal piknik nih, di Indonesia memang banyak juga yang melakukan piknik ya.
Betul.
Tapi tahu nggak sih kalau sebenarnya sejarah piknik itu memang sudah lama, sejak abad ke-17, Rio.
Wah,
ya.
Sudah lama juga ya.
Iya, dan mereka waktu itu mungkin kurang hiburan ya, orang-orang abad ke-17, belum ada televisi, belum banyak buku. Jadi yang mereka lakukan adalah piknik, keluar rumah, mencari udara segar, terus mereka ngobrol, makan-makan, hampir sama seperti apa yang kita lakukan sekarang.
Betul. Nah, ngomong-ngomong soal tradisi sejak abad 17 nih, Jin, beberapa orang di Washington DC ini punya tradisi unik. Mereka ingin mengulang piknik seperti pada tahun 1920-an.
Especially today, where you're in Washington, D.C., where there's so many divisions, today, right now. And we have this event that everyone is friendly at, you know, Democrat, Republican, Trump or Hillary, you know, like we knock down these divisions.
Musik, menari, dan bersenang-senang. Inilah yang membuat pesta Gatsby tak terlupakan. Tak peduli sudah berapa lama sejak F. Scott Fitzgerald menuliskan kisahnya yang legendaris, tema ini bertahan hingga sekarang. Dari Washington DC, demikian laporan tim VOA.
Jini, seperti apa sih kebiasaan warga Amerika ketika melakukan piknik ini?
Nah, biasanya sih setiap keluarga punya kebiasaannya mereka masing-masing ya. Tapi yang pasti mereka melakukannya di luar ruangan karena di Amerika, terutama di kota-kota besar, itu city atau urban planning-nya itu memang menyediakan banyak tempat terbuka. Itu memungkinkan bagi warga untuk melakukan kegiatan di luar ruangan. Nah, selain itu mereka juga menyediakan makanan-makanan yang gampang dibawa atau gampang dipersiapkan dan gampang juga dimakannya. Seperti sandwich misalnya. Dan juga minuman-minuman ringan lainnya gitu ya. Nggak selalu harus sehat sih, Rio.
Nah, tapi ngomong-ngomong soal nutrisi nih, Jin, ini ada seorang dokter yang bekerja sama dengan penulis buku untuk menyediakan kelas memasak untuk para pasiennya. Nah, tujuannya adalah untuk mengurangi angka obesitas yang terutama juga di Amerika Serikat ini sudah dialami oleh anak-anak sejak dini.
Hello, how are you, Miss Sally?
Nimali Fernando telah menyaksikan langsung hubungan antara makanan dan kesehatan anak.
On first glance, you think of diet-related illness as mainly just pediatric obesity. And it's true that about 30% of kids in our community and nationwide really are either overweight or obese. And that's a pretty staggering number. But as I paid more attention to a lot of the symptomatology that I was seeing in kids who even weren't obese or overweight, I was seeing that those symptoms often traced back in some way to the diet.
Untuk mengubahnya, dokter anak ini menulis buku bersama rekannya dan membuka website.
I simply posted recipes on that website, and when I would see patients in the office and felt like I didn't have enough time to go over nutrition topics with them, I would point them to that website. And then when I started to see how empowering that was for families to actually get in the kitchen and use our recipes and see their kids eating better, then I decided to teach a few cooking classes.
Pada 2013, dia memulai Dr. Yum Project.
Feeding is a developmental process.
Di dalam dapur di dalam kliniknya ini,
This is lentils with spinach.
dia memberikan inspirasi makanan sehat kepada para orang tua.
Maybe it's using our menu planner to see how they can make meal planning easy for them. Maybe it's using our budget-friendly recipes to figure out how to eat really healthy on a budget. Maybe it's using our baby food options so that they can see how to feed their babies the same food as they're eating.
Even my husband and I are eating better because we're making sure that the kids eat better.
Hampir semua bahan yang digunakan di kelas memasak ini berasal dari kebun klinik. Semua resepnya ditampilkan di website Dr. Yum.
Every single recipe is taste tested by families, and we give the real feedback that we get from families, parents and kids, about the foods that are in there. We've tagged all those recipes to make it really easy to be able to find.
Tujuan utamanya adalah untuk mengubah kebiasaan dan budaya makanan anak.
There's a lot going on in the media and just kind of advertising and things around that say that kids foods are like Lunchables, or kids foods are processed foods, and kids won't eat fresh carrot sticks, they'd rather have Doritos. You have to remember that those messages are out there because those companies are trying to make money. You have to learn how to try new foods a lot of the times.
Fernando dan koleganya berharap menginspirasi dokter anak lain di seluruh negeri untuk memulai kelas memasak, guna membantu keluarga menyiapkan makanan bergizi. Dari Virginia, tim VOA.
Nah, Rio, kayaknya kita harus cari tempat yang agak teduh karena musim panas di Washington di sini memang benar-benar brutal ya panasnya.
Betul. Nah, pemirsa jangan kemana-mana karena kami akan membawakan banyak cerita mengenai piknik di Amerika. Ini bulan piknik di Amerika dan juga Hari Persahabatan Internasional. Jangan kemana-mana, tetap di dunia kita. Pemirsa, masih dalam dunia kita edisi piknik dan Hari Persahabatan Internasional yang kami bawakan masih dari Meridian Hill Park di kawasan Washington DC.
Nah, kelihatan kan kami sudah mendapatkan posisi atau lokasi yang paling enak ini untuk menggelar tikar dan mengadakan piknik nanti. Tapi sebelumnya kami akan mengajak pemirsa untuk menonton sebuah liputan tentang Massive Open Online Course yang mengumpulkan para pendiri perusahaan rintisan supaya mereka bisa menjalin persahabatan dan membuat networking supaya mereka bisa membangun perusahaannya untuk lebih kuat lagi.
Y Combinator adalah perusahaan Silicon Valley yang telah membantu pendanaan perusahaan teknologi rintisan terkenal. Pengusaha di seluruh dunia bersaing untuk menjadi bagian dari program 10 minggu ini, karena hanya 2% dari pendaftar yang diterima. Sedikitnya 7.000 pendiri teknologi dari 140 negara mendaftar untuk belajar tentang perusahaan rintisan.
Hi, my name is Kai, and I'm building a company called Bhakti.
I'm the CEO of Biopen Energy Company.
Hey, we're Tap2, a Spotify for transportation.
Kelas-kelasnya diajarkan oleh pakar teknologi yang pernah berkecimpung di perusahaan seperti Facebook dan Slack. Para mentor juga menyediakan waktu mereka untuk bertemu siswanya lewat online maupun tatap muka.
Internet access has only been something that people had access to very recently in a lot of these markets. And in a lot of these communities where startups are super early, we wanted to be able to get in there and help them learn best practices in starting companies.
Acara puncak sekolah ini adalah hari presentasi. Ratusan perusahaan dari seluruh dunia menyampaikan ide mereka secara online. Bahkan dari Suriah yang dilanda perang, sebuah kelompok mengajar anak-anak cara membuat sirkuit elektronik. Kelompok lain menerapkan teknologi ke bidang-bidang seperti transportasi, perjalanan, dan pendidikan. Social Lives dari Sudan mencoba mempermudah tunanetra untuk bisa menggunakan media sosial.
People sort of just have this idea of Silicon Valley is where the startups are at, and it's really cool for me to see so many diverse companies from so many places around the world.
Startup School, we made a bunch of friends from the online chat. We're probably gonna continue those friendships and with other founders.
Mungkin belum ada Bill Gates atau Mark Zuckerberg dari sekolah startup ini, tapi memanfaatkan komunitas teknologi global ini bisa jadi langkah awal untuk bertahan setelah kelas mereka selesai. Dari Mountain View, California, tim VOA.